Well everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the iPhone 16 Pro Max and compare it against the iPhone 13 Pro Max and see which particular iPhone is a better one for you. Now, the first thing I'll definitely tell you is between both, if you have all the money in the world, as I always say, please go for the iPhone 16 Pro Max. This is a better iPhone. It's going to give you more power, more capability, and it makes so much more sense to go and buy something like an iPhone 16 Pro Max than buying something like a 13 Pro Max. But with that being said, I still think the iPhone 13 Pro Max series does a really good job at basically every single thing you're going to throw at it. And I've had an amazing time with something like my iPhone 13 Pro Max. So keep that in mind, like just because you have something like the 13 Pro Max doesn't mean you necessarily have to upgrade. And I do think by the end of this video, you might appreciate your 13 Pro Max a little bit more. But if you want to pick up either one of these particular phones, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of both these particular phones, the first thing to keep in mind is that with something like the iPhone 13 Pro Max, this phone came out in 2021, and on the front side, you're getting a 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display. Now, this is a very good panel. I like this panel a lot. It looks very good. The viewing angles are very, very nice. It's not the brightest panel of all time, but it is a very good panel, and I still think this thing holds up and looks very good for today's standards. The biggest advantage I would say for the, Apple, the iPhone 13 Pro Max is the fact that this phone is giving you a 120 Hz Pro Motion display. This is by far, once again, one of my most favorite things going on for this type of phone. Having that type of capability of basically having a phone that's going to be giving you that type of, Pro Motion display is so nice, and it's made and aged this panel so well. Like compared to all these other phones that came out, this one looks so much better than the 12, 13, like the 12, standard 13, 11, 10R. Like this phone has aged so much better, and I love this phone a lot because of it. So I couldn't talk higher, than the 13 Pro Max than I just did. The 16 Pro Max is taking it to another level. It's a bigger panel, so 6.9 inches. It's still giving you a high resolution panel. It's very good panel, thinner bezels. You're getting a dynamic island on this type of panel, which is nice. So you're not having to go ahead and deal with that notch. You're getting a dynamic island, which is nice. You're getting a bigger size panel. It's also an always on display as well. So that is something that's actually very nice. Being able to have that always on display just like that is a very, very nice thing. And you're essentially getting that here too. So having that always on display, having that type of capability is very cool. And once again, I'm a big fan of this type of, device. And the 16 Pro Max, like I said, is better. On the bottom, you're getting a lightning port on the 13 Pro Max, whereas on the 16 Pro Max, you're getting a USB Type-C port. So this in and of itself is another very big change. Going from Lightning to USB-C is massive, and you are essentially getting that type of capability when you're going through and getting something like the iPhone 16 Pro Max. You're also getting the action button and the camera button on the iPhone 16 Pro Max as well. The 13 Pro Max doesn't have any of those things except that ringer switch. On the back side of both these phones, you're getting frosted glass backs on both these devices. So it's very nice to have frosted glass backs. I'm a big fan of that type of capability, and you are essentially getting that on these types of phones, which again is super, super nice to have. You're also getting triple camera setups on the back side with that LiDAR sensor. So again, this in and of itself is a very nice thing to have, right? Having that type of capability, like I mentioned before, is super cool, and you're essentially getting that here in these types of phones as well, which again is very, very nice. Now beyond that, both have MagSafe, both have wireless charging. There's not really anything else super crazy going on with either one of these phones that we haven't seen before. But if you're definitely going to go and pick up a phone, I definitely do like something like the iPhone 16 Pro Max. It's better. But the 13 Pro Max is still a very, very good phone. And I'm still a massive fan of that type of device. Like I still think that's a very good phone to buy, and I couldn't recommend it enough. So from that side overall, that kind of covers it up there for the most part, if I'm being honest. Now, on top of that, some other big stuff to keep in mind are the cameras. So the cameras on these phones they're giving you triple camera setups on both, which again is a very nice type of camera layout to have. With something like the iPhone 13 Pro Max, you're able to do 4K at 60 on the front and the back. The iPhone 16 Pro Max, you're basically doing 4K at 60 on the front and the back, but 4K at 120 frames per second on the backside. I will say for the average person, it's not really going to matter. Like you're really not going to take advantage of all that what that camera has to offer, but the camera quality is going to be better on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. The video quality is going to be better. You're getting cinematic mode on both, but you're getting better capability overall inside of something like the iPhone 16 Pro Max than from something like the iPhone 13 Pro Max. You're also getting that dedicated camera button in the 16 Pro Max as well. But here's the big thing to keep in mind. In my personal opinion, right, if I'm looking at this type of camera, that 16 Pro Max camera is still a very, very good camera when it comes down to it. The 13 Pro Max is what I was referring to. The 13 Pro Max camera is still a very, very good camera. That's an excellent camera for sure. And I'm a massive fan of that type of camera when it comes down to it. It's an older lens, it's an older camera, but I think Apple did a really good job with this type of lens, and I do think that's a very important thing to keep in mind. Like if you're going to go through and pick up a phone, I think something like the iPhone 13 Pro Max still does a really good job, and I'm still a big fan of that type of lens when it comes down to it. So I would say from that side, definitely gets a thumbs up for me. Definitely not perfect, but I think the 16 Pro Max is better, but the 13 Pro Max is still a very good lens when it comes down to it as well. So that kind of covers it up there. Now another thing to keep in mind here too is basically with the software longevity. So both these phones are still supported with software for the time being, and they're both going to be supported with software probably for the next couple of years, right? Like the 13 Pro Max isn't going anywhere. That phone is essentially giving you basically like that, it's giving you a good long lasting phone and that type of device, which is nice. The 16 Pro Max is going to be the longer lasting one here though, for sure. So if you're wanting the phone that's going to be giving you that longer lasting phone, it definitely is going to be the iPhone 16 Pro Max. That phone is going to be giving you the overall better experience. So that is just like one thing to keep in mind here. Like if you're wanting the longer lasting phone, it's going to be the 16 Pro Max. But I think the 13 Pro Max still looks beautiful. I think it's still a very good looking phone. If you're going to go through and pick up a device, I think that phone still looks very, very good when it comes down to it. So keep that in mind. Again, not the biggest deal in the world, but that is kind of what's going on here. From a performance perspective though, this is another very interesting thing. So between both, the iPhone 16 Pro Max is basically going to go through and give you that Apple A18 Pro chip inside of it with 8GB of RAM, where the iPhone 13 Pro Max is giving you that A15 Bionic chip inside of it with 6GB of RAM. So this is another one of those big things to keep in mind here. If you're looking at phones that are going to be giving you better performance, better capability, better everything, it's going to be the iPhone 16 Pro Max, right? That phone is going to be giving you a significantly better everything basically across the board. And that is something to kind of keep in mind here. Right, if you're going to go through and pick up a phone, it makes a lot of sense to go and buy something like an iPhone 16 Pro Max over the 13 Pro Max. But like I stated before, the 13 Pro Max, it's because of that ProMotion display, it makes things feel and look so much better than even something that, like an iPhone 15, for example, even an iPhone 16 in some cases. The 13 Pro and Pro Max feel better, just feel faster, just because you don't have to deal with all of that, the 60 hertz display. So that's why I feel like with something like the 13 Pro Max, it still holds up very well. And if you're going to go through and pick up a phone, you can't really go wrong with something like an iPhone 16 Pro Max either, or the iPhone 13 Pro Max in my opinion. So overall, what I'll definitely tell you is, if you're going to go through and if you're going to pick up a phone, I would highly recommend buying something like an iPhone 13 Pro Max. I think this is still a very good phone. The 16 Pro Max is a better phone, for sure. But if the 16 Pro Max was a 10 out of 10, I think the 13 Pro Max is at least like an 8 out of 10. It is still very similar. There's still a lot of overlap here. And I would still recommend buying something like an iPhone 13 Pro Max. The 16 Pro Max clearly is the better one. But like I said, for the money, if you're going to spend some money here and there, I don't think you can go wrong with something like an iPhone 13 Pro Max when it comes down to it. So, like I said, if you want to pick up either one of these phones, the links are down in the description. You can get them from there, help support the channel at the same time, but that kind of wraps it up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section as well. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.